In this section, we're going to explain what the history of Linux has been and how we got to where we are today. It's nice to have some background on the operating system so you understand some of the quirks and eccentricities of how it works. We're using this Prezi presentation as a format to show this in its geographical context. The story begins in Finland, in Helsinki in particular. In 1991, Linus Torvalds, a student at the University of Helsinki, started tinkering with an IBM x86 compatible computer. He had just started using the Minix operating system, which is a microkernel and is meant for educational purposes, but is not open in nature. Linus wanted something that he could tinker with and use himself, so he started building his own kernel and his own operating system. Eventually, it got mature enough to where he decided to announce it, and he put it up on a Usenet post. In his initial post, he claimed that Linux would never be big and professional like GNU Hurd, which was sort of a competing operating system that eventually turned out to be vaporware and never quite came to life. In any case, lots of volunteers and community contributors around the world quickly started adapting and adding features to Linux. That's where it got its start and started to take off. Fast forward a couple of years to 1993 at Minnesota State University in Moorhead. Patrick Volkerding developed and released Slackware, which is one of the first Linux distributions. A Linux distribution is a package of software that makes an operating system. Linux itself is just a kernel, just the core of the system that manages the hardware and the scheduling and the things that we talked about in one of the last sections. But there's a lot more than just that to make an operating system work. You need a shell to manage commands. You need software to run on that system. You need things to edit text files. In general, there's lots of software that needs to be working in coordination in order for an operating system to work. And in Linux, an entire operating system is pulled together into what's called a distribution. Patrick Volkerding wrote Slackware, which is one of the first and most long-lived distributions. It's still managed and maintained today. Fast forward to North Carolina in 1995. By now, Linux is starting to make inroads with tech enthusiasts, although it's not yet really popular among businesses and enterprises. The first Linux Expo was organized by Donnie Barnes at North Carolina State University. The entry fee, $4. Mark Ewing was present at this expo. He later went on to start Red Hat, which is today one of the most popular and widely used distributions in enterprises. Now we move to Silicon Valley in 1997. Linus Torvalds moved from Finland to Silicon Valley to work for Transmeta, which is a CPU manufacturer. By now, Linux version 2 is released. It contains a number of advanced features needed by networks and used by businesses. In addition, many major distributions are starting to form and gain a larger user base. Popular distributions that people use today, such as SUSE, Red Hat, and Debian Linux, are gaining momentum. Now we move to Oregon in 2003. Torvalds has now moved from Silicon Valley to join open source development labs and is paid to work on Linux full-time. Linus's role now is as a kernel maintainer. He accepts code from many other contributors around the world, merges that code into the mainline kernel, and ensures that everything is operating and building smoothly. Enterprise use of Linux is accelerating and really is widespread at this point. The desktop environment for Linux, in particular the desktops GNOME and KDE, are ubiquitous. If you are a desktop Linux user, meaning you have it installed on your desktop at home or on your laptop or even on a tablet, though those weren't popular yet by this time, you're most likely using the GNOME and KDE window-managed environments. By 2007, of course, the Linux story has already been widely told. The Open Handset Alliance, of which, of course, Google is a large contributor, unveils Android as a Linux-based operating system for mobile devices, cementing Linux's place in the embedded systems market. In addition, the One Laptop Per Child project aims to ship low-priced Linux laptops to children in developing countries. The target price for these Linux laptops is around $100, though at this point it still hasn't made it past $200. So that brings us to Linux today in 2013. Linux-based web servers today account for nearly 75% of market share. The most common Linux servers in use are Nginx, a very fast and efficient web server, and Apache HTTPD, which has been around since the 90s. Valve Software, a gaming company, released its Steam gaming platform for Linux this year. The stable version of the Linux kernel at this point is version 3.10 and supports dozens of CPU architectures. Linux is on the bleeding edge when it comes to new operating system technology and new networking support. It is also a leader for jobs. 93% of surveyed businesses are said to be hiring Linux professionals, and sysadmins are the most sought after in this space. This is according to a job report from the Linux Foundation just this year. Hopefully this section gave you some context about how Linux got to where it is today and why it's absolutely imperative to the success of the internet.